Julian Bourne had 60 seconds to decide if he'd rather marry a gold digger or die poor. His father's ultimatum still rang in his ears as he stood behind a dented taco cart on Morrison Street, sweat soaking through his thrift store shirt. The lunch rush was coming. He could hear the stampede of footsteps from the office buildings 2 blocks away. His hands shook as he lit the propane burner. $12 billion. That's what he stood to lose. 6 months. That's all he had to find a woman who'd love him without knowing his last name opened doors to pharmaceutical empires and private islands. The first customer appeared, a construction worker with suspicious eyes and a $5 bill. You new here? The man's voice carried Brooklyn Street wisdom. Because you look like you've never held a spatula in your life, pretty boy. Julian's heart hammered. One wrong move, and this whole plan collapsed. First day? Be patient with me. Yeah? Well, don't burn my tortilla. I can smell fear and incompetence. The man grinned, but his eyes were testing, measuring, calculating whether this vendor was legit or some hipster playing poverty for Instagram likes. This was it. The moment Julian Bourne, Yale graduate, Fortune 500 heir, man who'd closed a $400 million deal before his 25th birthday, had to prove he could flip a decent taco without setting himself on fire. 3 weeks ago, he'd been engaged to Vanessa Chun. Perfect smile, perfect pedigree, perfect plan to divorce him and walk away with $50 million. His PI had found the emails, her lawyer coaching her through prenup loopholes while she texted Julian, forever and always, with heart emojis. 2 weeks ago, his father Richard had shattered a champagne glass against their penthouse floor and delivered the ultimatum. Find real love or lose everything. You have 6 months. Prove you can tell gold from gold diggers. 1 week ago, Julian had walked away from his life. No security detail. No black Amex. No Bourne on his name tag. Just Julian, and a cart that smelled like propane and broken dreams. The tortilla started smoking. Hey. The construction worker lunged forward. You're burning it. Julian flipped it, too hard. The tortilla sailed through the air like a frisbee and landed in a puddle 6 feet away. The man stared. Julian stared at the puddle. You know what, kid? The construction worker pocketed his $5. I'm gonna grab a hot dog. Try not to burn down the neighborhood. Julian stood alone behind his cart, the lunch crowd flowing around him like water around a stone. Invisible. Irrelevant. Exactly what he'd wanted to be. Except he had no idea what he was doing, and the clock was ticking. Then he heard her voice. You need help with that cart? Julian turned, and his carefully constructed plan, 6 months to find authentic love, 6 months to save his inheritance, 6 months to prove he was more than his father's money, shifted on its axis. She stood 3 feet away with paint-stained hands and eyes that saw straight through his disguise to something he wasn't sure existed anymore. The girl who would either save him or destroy him. And she was smiling. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back. Before we dive in, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. You don't want to miss what happens next. Because Julian's about to learn that pretending to be poor is easy. Pretending to deserve love? That's the real test. Let's continue. Her name was Sarah Kleinman, and she carried her lunch in a paper bag with grease stains that told stories. Julian noticed details now, the kind he'd never paid attention to when his world was measured in stock prices and board meetings. Sarah's sneakers had been resold at least twice. Her jacket, army green and oversized, had a patch on the elbow that didn't quite match the fabric. But her smile, God, her smile, was the kind money couldn't buy. Genuine, unguarded, the kind that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. Seriously, you look like you're about to pass out. She moved closer to the cart, assessing the situation with the efficiency of someone who'd solved problems her whole life. When's the last time you ate? Julian's stomach answered before he could lie, a traitorous growl that echoed between them. Sarah laughed, and the sound did something strange to his chest. That's what I thought. Here. She pulled a sandwich from her paper bag, turkey on wheat, wrapped in plastic wrap. I packed extra. I always pack extra. I can't take your lunch. Julian's voice came out rougher than intended. 3 weeks ago, a woman had ordered the most expensive champagne at dinner and left him with a $3,000 tab and trust issues. Now this stranger was offering him half her sandwich. You can, and you will. Sarah unwrapped it, broke it in half, and placed one piece on a napkin beside his propane burner. Rule number 1 of street vending. You can't help customers if you're running on empty. Trust me, I've worked enough service jobs to know. She worked service jobs. Past tense and present tense. Julian filed that information away, trying not to let his Harvard business education turn her into a case study. Subject demonstrates working-class values and resource-sharing behavior. No, stop. She wasn't a subject. She was a person. A person who was currently showing him how to properly heat a tortilla. See? Medium heat. Not too hot, or it gets crispy and breaks. Not too cold, or it stays doughy. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, flipping the tortilla at exactly the right moment. You ever work a grill before? No. The honest answer felt strange on his tongue. Julian Bourne never admitted to inadequacy. But Julian the taco cart operator? He was allowed to be clueless. I'm figuring it out as I go. Brave. Sarah glanced at him, and something flickered in her brown eyes. Approval? Curiosity? Most people wouldn't jump into street vending without experience. What made you do it? The truth sat in his throat like broken glass. Asterisk, my father thinks I'm incapable of recognizing real human connection. My ex-fiancée was planning to divorce me before we even got married. I'm a billionaire who doesn't know if anyone has ever actually loved me. Asterisk. Needed a change, he said instead. Fresh start. Sarah nodded like she understood more than he'd said. I get that. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to figure out who you really are. Her words hit harder than she could know. I'm Sarah, by the way. She extended her hand. Calloused palm, short nails, a silver ring on her thumb that looked handmade. I work at the community center 3 blocks down. Art therapy for kids. Julian shook her hand, and the contact sent electricity up his arm. Julian. Just Julian. Well, just Julian, you picked a good corner. Lunch rush here is solid, but you've got to speed up your prep time. People have 30-minute breaks. They can't wait 10 minutes for a taco. She spent the next 20 minutes teaching him everything. How to organize his workspace, where to position ingredients for maximum efficiency, how to read customers and anticipate orders. She didn't do it with condescension or pity. She did it like someone who believed in helping people get back on their feet. You running from something? She asked suddenly, assembling a taco with the ease of a surgeon. Or running towards something? Both. Neither. Everything. Trying to figure out what matters, Julian said, and it was the most honest thing he'd said in months. Sarah handed the taco to a waiting customer, a nurse in scrubs who paid and left with a grateful smile. Then Sarah turned back to him, and her expression had shifted into something softer, more vulnerable. I think what matters is whether you show up, she said quietly. Not where you come from or where you're going. Just whether you show up for the people in front of you. Her phone buzzed. She checked it and winced. I have to get back to work. We've got a dozen kids waiting for their painting class, and my coworker can't handle the chaos alone. She gathered her things, her paper bag, her secondhand jacket, her quiet dignity. But Julian, you're going to be okay. I can tell. How? The question escaped before he could stop it. Sarah smiled, that devastating, genuine smile. Because you're here. You could have given up after the burned tortilla and the construction worker, but you stayed. That means something. She started to walk away, and Julian felt panic rise in his chest. This woman, this stranger who'd fed him and taught him and seen something in him worth encouraging, she couldn't just disappear into the lunch crowd. Sarah, wait. She turned, eyebrows raised. Can I see you again? Maybe thank you properly? Julian's heart hammered. He sounded like an idiot. He was a billionaire who'd negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs, and he was stammering over asking a woman if he could see her again. Sarah's smile widened. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday. Same time. And Julian. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to something conspiratorial. Next time, I'll teach you the secret to perfect salsa verde. But only if you promise to actually eat lunch. Deal. Deal. She disappeared into the crowd, and Julian stood behind his cart, surrounded by the smell of propane and possibilities. For the first time in 6 months, maybe in his entire life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Drop a comment if you're already falling for Sarah. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens when Julian's perfect lie starts to crumble. 3 weeks changed everything. Julian learned the rhythm of Morrison Street. The morning rush of construction workers who needed coffee and breakfast burritos. The lunch crowd of nurses and teachers who counted their change carefully. The evening stragglers who bought tacos and shared their problems like he was a bartender instead of a vendor. He learned their names, their orders, their stories. And every Tuesday and Thursday, Sarah appeared like clockwork. She brought him coffee on cold mornings, cheap diner coffee in styrofoam cups, but she remembered he took it black. She showed him how to negotiate with suppliers, how to handle difficult customers with grace instead of legal threats. She told him about the kids at the community center, little Maya who only painted in blue, 8-year-old Diego who'd stopped talking after his father left but communicated through charcoal sketches. Sarah talked about them like they were treasures, not problems. "You should come see the center sometime," she said one Thursday afternoon, sitting on the curb beside his cart during the post-lunch lull. Her paint-stained fingers wrapped around a water bottle. "We're doing a mural project next month. Could use someone with your work ethic to help prep the wall." Julian's chest tightened. The community center, where she worked, where he'd have to maintain his lie in front of dozens of people who knew her, trusted her, loved her, where he might have to watch her interact with other men, men who weren't lying about their entire existence. "I'd like that," he said, and meant it despite the terror. Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression shifted, stress lines appearing around her eyes. "Damn, what's wrong?" "Landlord raised my rent again. 3rd time this year." She laughed, but it was hollow. "Apparently the neighborhood is up and coming, which means people like me are getting priced out by people who think poverty is aesthetic." Julian's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what she meant. His father's company owned real estate development firms that did exactly that, bought up affordable housing, renovated, and charged triple. Gentrification wrapped in progress. "How much?" The question came out before he thought it through. "Why? You gonna loan me $2,000? Sarah's tone was joking, but her eyes held real worry. "I'll figure it out. I always do. Maybe pick up weekend shifts at the diner, cut back on groceries." "It's fine." It wasn't fine. Julian could write her a check right now that would cover her rent for a decade. He could make one phone call and have his real estate people find her an apartment. A real apartment, not whatever cramped space she was fighting to keep. But Julian the taco vendor couldn't do any of that. So he did the only thing he could. "If you need extra work, I could use help with the cart. Weekend rushes are brutal. I'd split the profits." Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Julian felt naked under her gaze. Could she see through him? Did she know he was calculating profit margins that didn't exist, offering solutions to problems he could actually solve with a single wire transfer? "You do that." Her voice softened. "Julian, you barely make enough to keep this cart running. I've seen your numbers. You're not getting rich out here. Neither are you, but you keep helping people." Julian met her eyes. Maybe that's the point. Something shifted between them, the air charged with electricity, with possibility, with the dangerous edge of real connection. Sarah reached out and touched his hand, just her fingers brushing his knuckles, but it burned through him like fire. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. But not this. Not someone who actually gives a damn." Before Julian could respond, chaos erupted. A man in an expensive suit, Brooks Brothers, Julian recognized it because he owned 12 identical ones in his penthouse closet, stopped at the cart. His face twisted with disgust as he surveyed Julian's setup. "You have a permit for this?" The man's voice dripped with contempt. "Because this corner is an eyesore. Street vendors like you are ruining this neighborhood's property values." Julian's blood went cold. The man looked familiar. Something about the sharp features, the aggressive posture. "I have a permit," Julian said evenly. "Current and legal." "Let me see it." Sarah stood up, positioning herself between Julian and the suit. "He just told you it's legal. What's your problem?" "My problem is that I'm trying to close a commercial real estate deal 3 blocks from here, and having taco carts and homeless-looking vendors on the street is making my investors nervous." The man's eyes raked over Julian with pure venom. "Some of us are actually contributing to this city's economy instead of cluttering sidewalks." Julian's fists clenched. He knew this game. He'd played it from the other side, the side where property values mattered more than people, where urban renewal meant erasure. "Some of us feed people who can't afford your $15 artisanal sandwich shops," Sarah shot back, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. "Julian works harder in one day than you probably work in a month." So why don't you take your property values and— Sarah. Julian touched her shoulder, trying to defuse the situation before it exploded. But the man's eyes had locked onto something behind them. A black Mercedes pulling up to the curb. The back window rolled down, and Julian's world stopped. His father sat in the back seat, steel gray eyes boring into him from across the street. Richard Bourne hadn't come alone. Beside him sat James Castellano, CEO of Castellano Properties, one of the biggest commercial developers in the city. And in that moment, Julian recognized the man in the Brooks Brothers suit. Michael Castellano, James's son, the man currently harassing him. The man whose company was in the middle of negotiating a $200 million joint venture with Bourne Pharmaceuticals. Julian. Sarah's voice cut through his panic. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Across the street, his father's expression remained neutral, but his message was clear. Asterisk, this is your test. Handle it. Asterisk. Michael Castellano stepped closer, his cologne expensive and suffocating. You know what? I'm calling code enforcement. Let's see how legal your little operation really is. He pulled out his phone, and Julian had to make a choice. Reveal himself and lose everything. The bet, Sarah's trust, his last chance at knowing if real love existed. Or stay silent and watch his entire plan crumble. Sarah's hand found Julian's arm, her grip firm and grounding. Make your call, she said to Michael, her voice calm but laced with fury. But while you're at it, maybe call your lawyer too. Because harassment of legal vendors is a violation of City Code 3-47. I know. I helped write the community advocacy brief that got it passed. Michael's finger hovered over his phone. You're bluffing. Try me. Sarah pulled out her own phone, scrolling with practiced ease. I have the city councilwoman's direct number. She loves small business owners. Hates corporate bullies. Want to guess which category you fall into? Across the street, Julian caught the briefest flicker of approval in his father's eyes before the Mercedes window rolled up and the car pulled away. Test passed, for now. Michael's jaw tightened. He glanced at his father's retreating car, then back at Sarah and Julian. This isn't over. He straightened his suit jacket. Enjoy your little taco stand while it lasts. He stalked away, and Julian exhaled for what felt like the first time in 5 minutes. You okay? Sarah turned to him, concern replacing her earlier steel. That guy was a complete ass. Yeah. Julian's heart was still hammering. Thanks for that. You didn't have to step in. Yes, I did. Sarah's eyes flashed. People like him think they can push people like us around because we don't have expensive lawyers or family connections. But we have something better. We have each other. Community. That matters more than his property deals. People like us. The words hit Julian like a punch. She'd placed them in the same category: struggling vendors, working-class fighters, people on the outside of power looking in. She had no idea he was exactly the kind of person she'd just defended him against. The kind of person his father was. Sarah? He needed to tell her something. Anything that resembled truth. You're shaking. She took his hands, and her touch steadied him. Hey, look at me. He's gone. You're safe. Your card is legal. Everything's okay. But everything wasn't okay. Over the next 2 weeks, Julian fell deeper into the lie and deeper into something far more dangerous: real feelings. Sarah started staying later at the card, helping him close up. They'd walk through the neighborhood as streetlights flickered on, and she'd point out details he'd never noticed. The bodega owner who gave day-old bread to homeless veterans, the retired teacher who ran a free tutoring program from her apartment, the murals painted by kids from the community center. This is the real city, Sarah said one evening, her breath fogging in the October air. Not the penthouses and galas. This, people showing up for each other when nobody's watching. That's what matters. Julian wanted to tell her he'd spent his entire life in those penthouses, at those galas, watching people perform philanthropy for tax breaks and social media clout. Instead, he said, tell me more about your dreams. They sat on a bench in Morrison Park, the small green space wedged between apartment buildings where kids played and old men fed pigeons. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter. I want to open my own art therapy practice. Not just for kids, for everyone. Trauma survivors, veterans, people recovering from addiction. Her eyes lit up with passion. Art saved my life when I was younger. I want to give that to other people. What happened when you were younger? Sarah was quiet for a moment. My mom got sick when I was 16. Cancer. We lost everything paying for treatment. savings, house, everything. She died anyway. Her voice stayed steady, but Julian saw the pain underneath. I ended up in foster care for 2 years. Bounced around. Our class was the only place I felt like myself. Julian's chest ached. While he'd been learning to sail in the Hamptons at 16, Sarah had been learning to survive. I'm sorry, he said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate. Don't be. She turned to him, and her smile was sad but genuine. It taught me what matters. Not money or status, just showing up for people. Being present. Being real. She bumped his shoulder with hers. Like you do. Every day at that cart, you're present. You see people. That's rare, Julian. Guilt twisted in his stomach like poison. What about you? Sarah asked. What are your dreams? The question paralyzed him. What were his dreams? Not his father's dreams of dynasty building. Not society's expectations of wealth management. What did Julian Bourne actually want? I think I'm still figuring that out, he said slowly. Maybe that's why I'm here. To figure out who I am when everything else is stripped away. Sarah studied him with those knowing eyes. You're running from something big, aren't you? I won't push, but Julian, whatever it is, you can't run forever. Eventually you have to face it. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Thomas. His assistant had been maintaining minimal contact, but this was marked urgent. Asterisk, your father moved up the timeline. 3 months left, not 6. Castellano merger complications. He needs your answer soon. Asterisk. Julian's blood ran cold. 3 months. 12 weeks to prove he could find authentic love or lose everything. Work emergency? Sarah asked, noticing his expression. Something like that. He pocketed the phone, but his mind was racing. 3 months wasn't enough time. He was falling for Sarah, yes, but she was falling for a fiction. For Julian the vendor, not Julian the heir. How could any of this be real if it was built on lies? Hey. Sarah stood, extending her hand. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led him 6 blocks to the community center, a converted warehouse with bright murals covering every exterior wall. Inside, the space glowed with warmth. Kids' artwork covering the walls, the smell of paint and creativity, the sound of laughter echoing from the back rooms. This is home, Sarah said softly. This is what I'm fighting for when I pick up extra shifts and skip meals to make rent. These kids, they need a place that sees them, that believes in them. She showed him the mural project, a massive wall where kids were painting their dreams. Julian saw dinosaurs and astronauts, families holding hands, houses with gardens, words like hope and love and home, in a dozen different languages and styles. What would you paint? Sarah asked. If you could paint anything on this wall, what would it be? Julian looked at the wall, then at Sarah. Paint-stained and passionate, and completely, devastatingly real. The truth, he whispered. Sarah smiled. Then paint it. But Julian knew the truth would destroy everything. What's your dream? Comment below. And hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get intense, and you won't want to miss what happens when secrets start unraveling. The kiss happened on a Tuesday, 6 weeks into Julian's double life, during the evening lull when Morrison Street quieted and the city exhaled. Sarah had stayed to help him prep for the next day, chopping vegetables while Julian cleaned the griddle. She was telling him about little Maya, how the girl had finally painted something other than blue, a sunrise in orange and pink that made the whole class cry. She said it reminded her of hope. Sarah laughed, wiping her eyes. 8 years old, and she's teaching us all about resilience. Julian turned to respond, and suddenly she was right there, close enough that he could see the paint smudge on her cheek, smell the faint lavender of her shampoo, feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Julian, she whispered, and his name on her lips undid him. He kissed her, soft at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But Sarah leaned in, her hands finding his chest, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. She tasted like the coffee they'd shared and something sweeter, possibility, promise, truth. When they finally broke apart, Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I didn't plan that, Julian said, his voice rough. Good. Sarah smiled. The best things aren't planned. They just happen. When they're real. Real. The word haunted him as he walked her to the bus stop, as he watched her wave goodbye through the scratched window, as he returned to his cart alone under the streetlights. Nothing about this was real. Not his name on the vendor permit, Not his studio apartment in the sketchy neighborhood, actually a property he owned through a shell corporation. Not his carefully constructed poverty. He was living a lie, and the woman he was falling for believed every word of it. His phone buzzed. "Thomas, your father wants a meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Non-negotiable." Julian stood in the cold, surrounded by the smell of propane and his own deception, and knew everything was about to collapse. The Bourne Pharmaceuticals executive suite occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower that scraped clouds. Julian entered through the private elevator, wearing the designer suit he'd kept hidden, feeling like he was putting on a costume of his former self. His father sat behind a desk the size of a small car, reading a contract with surgical focus. "You're 12 minutes late," Richard said without looking up. "Traffic. Lies." His father finally met his eyes. "You've gotten comfortable with those lately, haven't you?" Julian's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Richard slid a folder across the desk. Julian opened it, and his world shattered. Photographs. Dozens of them. Him and Sarah at the cart, walking through the neighborhood, sitting in Morrison Park, kissing under the streetlight. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the document underneath. A full background check on Sarah Kleinman. Her employment history, credit score, medical records, family tree. Every intimate detail of her life, exposed and analyzed like a corporate acquisition target. "How long have you known?" Julian's voice came out strangled. "Since week 2. You think I'd let my only son vanish into the city without surveillance?" Richard leaned back. "I wanted to see if you'd commit to the exercise or give up when things got difficult. I'm impressed. You lasted longer than I expected." This wasn't an exercise. Julian's hands shook with rage. This was my life. She's not a test subject. She's a person. A person whose financial desperation makes her an excellent candidate for manipulation. Richard's tone was clinical. "The rent increase? I arranged that. The delays in her community center funding? My people. I've been controlling the variables, Julian, creating pressure to see how she'd respond, to see if she'd start looking for a wealthy savior." The room tilted. "You've been sabotaging her life? For what? Some sick experiment?" "To protect you." Richard's voice cracked, just slightly, but enough for Julian to hear the fear underneath. "Your mother died because I didn't protect her from the vultures. I won't lose you the same way." Julian's mother. The woman he barely remembered, who died when he was 7. Officially, complications from pneumonia. Unofficially, stress-induced heart failure after discovering her best friend had befriended her solely to get close to Richard's fortune. "Sarah is nothing like that," Julian said. "You don't know what she is. Neither do I." Richard stood, walking to the window. "So here's what happens next. You tell her the truth. Tonight. If she stays, if she can forgive the deception and love you anyway, then you've proven your point. You inherit everything. And if she leaves, then you've learned a valuable lesson about trust and human nature, and I'll find you a suitable match from pre-vetted candidates." Richard turned. "Either way, the experiment ends today." Julian felt something crack inside him. "You turned my life into a research project. I turned your naivety into education." Richard's expression softened, barely. "I'm not the villain here, Julian. The world is. I'm just teaching you to survive it." Julian didn't go back to the cart. He walked for hours through the city, his phone buzzing relentlessly with texts from Sarah. "Where are you? Are you okay? Julian, you're scaring me. Please respond." Finally, "I'm coming to find you." She found him at Morrison Park, sitting on their bench as darkness fell. She was breathless from running, her paint-stained jacket unzipped, concern etched into every line of her face. "What happened?" She sat beside him. "You disappeared. I thought something terrible. I need to tell you something." Julian's voice sounded dead even to his own ears. "And you're going to hate me." Sarah's expression shifted, fear replacing concern. "Julian, you're freaking me out." He turned to face her, memorizing everything. Her worried eyes, her chapped lips, the way she'd already reached for his hand even though she didn't know what was coming. "My name isn't just Julian," he said. "It's Julian Bourne. My father owns Bourne Pharmaceuticals. I'm not a struggling vendor. I'm a billionaire. The cart, the clothes, this whole thing, it was fake. A test to find someone who'd love me for me, not my money." Sarah's hand went slack in his. "Everything we've shared, every moment, it was real for me." Julian continued, words tumbling out desperately. "But I lied about who I was. I lied about everything. Sarah stood slowly, backing away like he was a stranger. You pretended to be poor? You let me buy you sandwiches, teach you how to survive, worry about your rent. Her voice broke. I told you about my mother, about losing everything, and you were playing dress up in my life. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Tears streamed down her face. Was I your social experiment? Your poverty tourism? Did you and your billionaire friends laugh about the stupid girl who fell for the rich boy playing pretend? Sarah, no. Don't. She held up her hand. Don't say my name. You don't get to say my name. She turned and walked away, and Julian sat frozen as the woman he loved disappeared into the city. His phone buzzed. His father. Well, what's the verdict? Julian threw his phone into the bushes and put his head in his hands. He'd lost her, and he deserved it. Julian didn't sleep for 3 days. He stood behind the taco cart on Morrison Street like a ghost, going through the motions mechanically. Customers came and went. He barely saw them. Every face blurred into Sarah's, her devastated expression, her tears, the way she'd looked at him like he was a monster. Because maybe he was. Thomas appeared on day 4, immaculate in his suit, looking at Julian's unshaven face and wrinkled clothes with barely concealed concern. Sir, your father is expecting a decision. Tell him I forfeit. Julian's voice was hollow. He can have the company, the money, all of it. Thomas blinked. Mr. Bourne, you're not thinking clearly. You've spent 6 weeks on this project. Project? Julian laughed bitterly. That's what everyone keeps calling it. A project. An experiment. Not a woman's heart I destroyed for my father's amusement. With respect, sir, Miss Kleiman will recover. People always do. Julian's hand shot out, gripping the edge of the cart so hard his knuckles went white. Get out. Now. Before I say something we'll both regret. Thomas left. The lunch rush came. Julian served tacos to people who didn't know his world had ended. A teacher ordered 2 carnitas. A construction worker wanted as usual. A nurse asked if he was okay. She'd noticed he'd been quiet lately. Fine. Julian lied, because lying had become his native language. Then the cart across the street arrived. Same style as his. Same setup. But the man operating it wore an expensive watch and designer sunglasses, and his smile was predatory. Michael Castellano. He waved at Julian like they were old friends. Thought I'd try the street vendor life. See what all the fuss is about. Julian's blood went cold. Michael set up quickly, too quickly, with the efficiency of someone who'd hired people to teach him. Within minutes, he was shouting offers. Premium tacos. Half price. Better quality than the competition. Customers drifted toward Michael's cart. Julian watched his line disappear. What are you doing? Julian crossed the street, anger overriding caution. Michael's smile widened. Business. You understand business, don't you? Oh wait, you're just a struggling vendor. You probably don't understand market competition. This is Morrison Street. These are people with limited money trying to feed their families. You're treating them like a game. Funny. Michael leaned closer. That's exactly what my father said you were doing. Playing games with real people's lives. How'd that work out with your girlfriend? Sarah, right? Julian's fist connected with Michael's jaw before he could think. Michael staggered back, hand to his face, eyes blazing with triumph. There it is. The real Julian Bourne. Not so noble when someone pushes back, are you? A crowd gathered. Someone was filming on their phone. Julian realized with sickening clarity that he'd just made everything worse. Michael straightened, wiping blood from his lip. See you in court, Bourne. Assault charges look great on billionaire heirs. He packed up his cart and left, and Julian stood in the street, surrounded by staring faces and the ruins of his careful disguise. The video went viral by evening. Billionaire heir caught running fake taco cart, assaults rival vendor. The comments were savage. Rich people really will cosplay poverty for fun. He was probably studying us like lab rats. That girlfriend dodged a bullet. Julian's phone exploded with calls. Media requests. His father. The company's PR team. He ignored all of them. Instead, he went to the community center. The mural Sarah had shown him glowed under the streetlights. Kids' dreams painted in bright colors. He stood outside, staring at the wall where she'd asked him what he'd paint. The truth. He'd said he'd paint the truth, and then he'd continued lying. The door opened. But it wasn't Sarah. It was Rosa, the center's director. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. She doesn't want to see you, Rosa said without preamble. I know. Julian gestured helplessly at the mural. I wanted to be near something she loves. Rosa studied him for a long moment. You really hurt her. Sarah's been through hell, losing her mother, foster care, clawing her way up from nothing. She learned not to trust people who pretend to be something they're not. She crossed her arms. Then you came along and confirmed every fear she's ever had. I never meant to hurt her. Intentions don't erase impact. Rosa's voice was firm, but not unkind. But I'll tell you what I told Sarah when she came to me crying. People are complicated. Good people make terrible choices. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it means there might be a path forward. If you're willing to do the work. What work? Being honest. Not just with her, with yourself. Rosa gestured to the building. You know what we do here? We help people face their trauma, their pain, their truth. We don't let them hide behind masks or money or pretense. We make them get real. I don't know how to do that, Julian admitted. I've been performing my whole life. For my father, for society, for everyone. I don't know who I am without the performance. Then figure it out. Rosa turned to go back inside. But do it for yourself, not for her. Because if you can't love yourself, your real self, you'll never be able to love anyone else authentically. The door closed, and Julian was alone with the murals and his failures. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Park. Tomorrow. 6 a.m. Come alone. Hope and terror flooded through him in equal measure. Sarah wanted to see him, or she wanted to destroy him in person. Either way, Julian would be there. He didn't sleep that night. At 5:30 a.m., he stood at Riverside Park as the sun began its slow climb over the city. The park was empty except for early joggers and the river's quiet whisper. Sarah appeared at exactly 6 a.m. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her paint-stained jacket pulled tight. But she was there. She'd come. Thank you for, Julian started. Don't. Sarah's voice was cold. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here because I need answers. Real ones. No more lies. Julian nodded, throat tight. Did you ever actually care about me? Sarah asked. Or was I always just part of your father's test? The question hung between them like a blade. And Julian knew his next words would determine everything. Julian looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and decided that if he'd lost everything else, he could at least lose it honestly. The first 2 weeks? I don't know. His voice cracked. I was following a plan, playing a role, trying to prove something to my father and myself. You were part of the experiment, and I hate myself for that. Sarah flinched, but didn't walk away. But then you brought me that sandwich. Julian took a shaky breath. And you taught me how to flip tortillas. You told me about Maya and Diego and the murals. You showed me Morrison Street, the real city, not the one I'd seen from penthouse windows. And somewhere in there, the experiment stopped and something real started. When? Sarah's eyes were hard. When exactly did I stop being your sociology project? The night in Morrison Park. When you told me about your mother. Julian's hands trembled. You said art saved your life, and I realized you were saving mine. Not Julian Bourne, the heir, Julian, the person, the one I'd buried under expectations and performance. You saw him. You believed in him. And I fell in love with you so hard and so fast it terrified me. Tears streaked down Sarah's face. But you kept lying. I did. Because I was a coward. Julian stepped closer. I convinced myself I was protecting what we had, that telling you the truth would destroy it. But I was really protecting myself from the possibility that you might look at me the way you're looking at me now. Like I'm not who you thought I was. You're not. Sarah's voice broke. The man I fell in love with was kind and present and struggled to make rent like everyone else. He understood what it meant to fight for survival. That person doesn't exist. He does exist. Julian's desperation clawed at his throat. Sarah, that person is more real than Julian Bourne has ever been. The cart taught me things 28 years of privilege never could. How to see people. How to show up. How to care about something beyond profit margins and board meetings. You taught me that. By lying to me every single day. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. Do you know what the worst part is? Not that you're rich. Not even that you lied. It's that I told you everything. My trauma, my dreams, my fears. And you couldn't trust me with the truth. You thought I was someone who needed to be tested. Manipulated. Controlled. No. Yes, Julian. That's exactly what you thought. Sarah's anger finally broke through. You and your father decided I couldn't be trusted to love you for the right reasons, so you built an elaborate trap to prove it. How is that different from what Vanessa did to you? She pretended to love you for money. You pretended to be poor to find love. Both of you were lying. Both of you were manipulating. The comparison hit Julian like a physical blow because it was true. You're right, he whispered. I became exactly what I was trying to avoid. And I'm sorry. God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. They stood in silence, the river flowing beside them, the city waking up around them. I read about your mother, Sarah said finally, her voice softer. After the video went viral, I looked you up. I read about how her best friend betrayed your family, how your father never remarried, never dated, built walls around you both. Julian nodded, unable to speak. I understand why you're terrified of being used. Sarah wiped her eyes. But Julian, you can't build a relationship on fear. You can't love someone while simultaneously testing whether they deserve it. That's not love. That's surveillance. I know that now. Do you? Sarah turned to face him fully. Because I need you to understand something. I fell in love with a taco vendor who couldn't flip tortillas to save his life, who listened to construction workers complain about their day, who learned everyone's name and their orders and their problems. That person was real to me. The money, the company, the penthouse, I don't care about any of that. But I care about honesty. I care about being seen as a partner, not a test. Julian's heart hammered. You fell in love with me? Past tense. Sarah's voice wavered. I fell in love with someone I thought existed. I don't know who you are anymore. Let me show you. The words tumbled out desperately. Not as a vendor, not as an heir, just as me. No more lies, no more tests. Just the truth, however messy and complicated it is. Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Julian saw the war happening behind her eyes, the desire to believe him fighting against the pain he'd caused. I told my father I'm forfeiting the inheritance, Julian said quietly. The company, the money, all of it. He can keep it. I don't want anything built on manipulation and fear. Sarah's eyes widened. You did what? I walked away. Because none of it matters if I can't look at myself in the mirror. If I can't be someone worth loving. Julian's voice steadied. I'm going to keep the card. Actually keep it. Learn the business legitimately. Maybe I'll fail. Probably I'll fail. But at least it'll be real. At least I'll be building something honest. Julian, that's billions of dollars. I know. He almost smiled. And it terrifies me. I've never had to actually survive on my own merit. But you do it every day? Rosa does it. Everyone on Morrison Street does it. If they can build lives worth living without trust funds, maybe I can too. Sarah was quiet for so long Julian thought she might walk away. But then she said, I need time. I need space to figure out if I can trust you again. If we can build something real after everything that's happened. I understand. Julian's chest ached. But there was hope too. Fragile and tentative, but there. But Julian? Sarah met his eyes. If you're serious about the card, about doing this legitimately, I know a guy who does vendor consulting. He's helped dozens of small business owners stay afloat. I could introduce you, if you want. It was an olive branch. Small but real. I'd like that, Julian said. Thank you. Sarah nodded and started to walk away. Then she turned back. And Julian? Get rid of your father's surveillance team. All of them. If you want to prove you're different, start by actually trusting people. She left, and Julian stood by the river as the sun climbed higher. For the first time in his life, he had no safety net, no trust fund to fall back on, no father's empire waiting to catch him. And somehow, he felt more free than he ever had. Is Sarah making the right choice? Should she give Julian another chance? Drop your thoughts below. And if you're invested in this story, smash that subscribe button. 3 months later, Julian stood behind his cart on Morrison Street, and everything had changed. The cart was still dented. His hands were still calloused. But now the business was real, filed taxes, legitimate suppliers, actual profit margins that barely kept him afloat. He'd moved into a studio apartment above a laundromat, the kind where the radiator clanked at 3 a.m. and the shower only produced lukewarm water. He'd never been happier. Sarah hadn't contacted him since that morning by the river. Julian respected her space, even though it killed him. He saw evidence of her everywhere. The kids from the community center who stopped by for free tacos on Fridays, a program Julian had started without telling her. Rosa occasionally appeared with cryptic updates. She's doing well, or she painted something beautiful yesterday. Julian didn't ask for more. He was learning patience. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, his father's Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Richard Bourne emerged, looking older than Julian remembered. 3 months had etched new lines around his eyes, turned his steel-gray hair whiter at the temples. "You're still here," Richard said, surveying the cart with something that might have been respect. "Where else would I be? I thought you'd come crawling back by now." His father's voice lacked its usual edge. "Begging for your inheritance. Most people do when reality hits. I'm not most people." Julian flipped a tortilla with practiced ease. "You taught me that, remember?" Richard was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong." Julian nearly dropped the spatula. "I'm sorry, what?" "I was wrong." His father's voice cracked. "About the test. About controlling your life. About believing that love required surveillance and manipulation." He looked away, and Julian saw something shocking in his father's eyes: tears. "I was so terrified of losing you the way I lost your mother that I became the thing I was trying to protect you from. A manipulator. A controller. Someone who valued safety over trust." Julian set down the spatula, his hands shaking. "Your mother would have hated what I did to you," Richard continued. "She would have hated what I became after she died. She believed in love, real, messy, dangerous love, the kind that makes you vulnerable. And I've spent 20 years trying to eliminate vulnerability from our lives." He finally met Julian's eyes. "I'm sorry, son. For the surveillance, for the manipulation, for making you feel like you had to perform to deserve love. You never did. You were always enough." Julian's throat closed. In 28 years, his father had never apologized. Not once. "Why now?" Julian managed. "Because I read Sarah's letter." "What letter?" Richard pulled an envelope from his coat. "She sent it to my office 3 weeks ago. She didn't know if I'd read it, but she sent it anyway." Julian took the letter with trembling hands. "Dear Mr. Bourne, you don't know me, but I know your son. The real one. Not the heir you tried to mold, not the test subject you monitored, but the man who learned to make tacos and listened to strangers' problems and showed up every day despite being terrified. That man is kind. He's brave. He's flawed and honest, and trying desperately to be better than his circumstances taught him to be. You raised him in a prison of privilege and called it protection. You taught him that love requires testing and trust requires surveillance. But here's what you didn't teach him. Vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Being seen is worth the risk of being hurt." Julian learned those lessons on Morrison Street. From construction workers and nurses and kids who paint their trauma into art. From people who have nothing but show up for each other anyway. He's your son, Mr. Bourne. But he's also his own person. And he's choosing a life that terrifies him because it's real. That takes more courage than anything you or I could ever do from behind our walls. I don't know if Julian and I have a future. I'm still healing from what happened. But I know he deserves a father who sees him, really sees him, and loves him anyway. Maybe it's time you tried. Sincerely, Sarah Kleinman. Julian's vision blurred. "She wrote this 3 weeks ago?" "She's been watching you," Richard said quietly. "Rosa told her about the free tacos for kids. About how you helped the bodega owner fix his delivery truck. About the rent money you loaned to the single mother down the street. Money you didn't have, but gave anyway. Sarah's been watching me. From a distance. Making sure you were serious. That the change was real." His father almost smiled. "She's smart. Careful. She wasn't going to risk her heart again without evidence." Julian's pulse raced. "Where is she?" "At the community center. She's expecting you." Richard placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. The first time he'd touched his son with affection in years. "Go. And Julian, whatever happens with her, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Not for walking away from the money, for walking toward yourself. That takes more strength than I ever had." Julian pulled his father into a hug, and Richard held on like a drowning man. "Thank you," Julian whispered. "Go get her." Julian ran the 6 blocks to the community center, his heart hammering against his ribs. The mural wall had changed. New paintings covered the surface, kids' dreams in brilliant colors. But in the center, taking up a massive section, was something that stopped Julian's breath. A portrait of him. Not Julian Bourne, the heir. Not the polished version in expensive suits. But Julian behind the taco cart, laughing with a customer, paint stains on his shirt, joy and fear and authenticity captured in brushstrokes. Below it, in Sarah's handwriting, the truth, messy and beautiful. "Do you like it?" Julian turned. Sarah stood in the doorway, paint-stained and perfect, her eyes cautious but hopeful. "You painted this," he breathed. "I painted what I saw. What I still see, when I look at you." Sarah walked closer. A man who made terrible choices, but is trying desperately to make better ones. A man who walked away from billions because being honest mattered more than being comfortable. A man who shows up. "Sarah, I'm not saying everything's fixed." She cut him off gently. "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But I'm saying I see you trying. And maybe we could try together. Build something real. Something honest." Julian closed the distance between them. "I love you. Not the version I pretended to be, not the heir my father wanted me to be, the actual me. Flawed and scared and desperately in love with you." "I love you too," Sarah whispered. "The real you. The one who burns tortillas and listens to people and isn't afraid to be vulnerable anymore." Their kiss tasted like paint and hope and second chances. Behind them, the mural glowed in the afternoon light, a testament to truth, to growth, to love that survived deception and emerged stronger. "So what now?" Sarah asked, smiling against his lips. "Now," Julian grinned. "Now we figure it out. Together. No more lies, no more tests. Just us." "Just us," Sarah agreed. And for the first time in his life, Julian knew exactly who he was. 1 year later, Morrison Street looked different. Julian's taco cart had multiplied into 3 carts, each operated by formerly homeless vendors he'd trained and partnered with. The model was simple. He provided the equipment and training. They kept 70% of profits. It wasn't charity. It was community building, the kind Sarah had taught him actually worked. The business barely broke even, but Julian had learned that success wasn't measured in profit margins. He stood at the original cart on a crisp October morning, prepping for the lunch rush, when Sarah appeared with 2 coffee cups and a smile that still made his heart stutter. "Morning, partner," she said, handing him the coffee, black, the way he liked it. "Morning, love." He kissed her, quick and sweet, before returning to his prep work. "Big day. Huge day." Sarah's eyes sparkled. "You nervous?" "Terrified." Today was the grand opening of the Julian Bourne Community Arts Center, a converted warehouse 3 blocks from Morrison Street that combined Sarah's art therapy program with Julian's social enterprise model. The funding had come from an unexpected source, Richard Bourne, who donated $5 million in his late wife's name, with one condition, that Julian and Sarah run it together, their way. "Your father just texted," Sarah said, checking her phone. "He's bringing the entire board of directors to the opening. Wants to show them what real philanthropy looks like." She laughed. "He's really committed to this redemption arc." Julian smiled. His relationship with his father had transformed slowly, painfully, honestly. Richard had sold the pharmaceutical company 6 months ago, handed the reins to new leadership, and stepped back to focus on the foundation. They had dinner once a week now, awkward conversations that sometimes ended in arguments, but always ended in, "I love you." Progress, not perfection. "How are the kids?" Julian asked, referencing the 20 students enrolled in the center's pilot program. "Maya painted a self-portrait yesterday, in every color imaginable." Sarah's voice filled with pride. "Diego's been teaching the younger kids how to sketch. And remember Elijah, the kid who wouldn't participate? He sculpted something incredible, a phoenix rising from ashes." His words, "That's me, rising." Julian's throat tightened. This was why they'd built the center. Not for tax breaks or social media clout, but for moments like Elijah claiming his own resurrection. "I got an email from Vanessa," Julian said carefully. He and Sarah had built their relationship on radical honesty. No more secrets, even uncomfortable ones. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Your ex-fiancée? What did she want?" "To apologize, actually." Julian pulled out his phone, showing her the message. She said watching our story in the media made her realize what she'd been chasing, security, not love. She's in therapy now, working on herself. Good for her. Sarah's response surprised him with its genuine warmth. "It takes courage to face yourself. I hope she finds what she's looking for." This was who Sarah was, someone who'd been hurt but chose empathy over bitterness. It was one of the 1,000 reasons Julian loved her more every day. Speaking of finding things, Julian reached into his jacket pocket, his heart hammering. "I have something for you. Julian Bourne, if that's what I think it is. Let me do this properly." He took her hand. "A year ago, I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, convinced that love required games and tests and protection. You saw through all of it. You called me out, made me face myself, and then, impossibly, gave me a second chance. Tears already pooled in Sarah's eyes. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. That showing up matters more than showing off. That real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be honest. Julian's voice cracked. Sarah Kleinman, you made me want to be honest. About my fears, my failures, my hope that maybe I could be someone worth loving. You've always been worth loving, Sarah whispered. I'm starting to believe that. Because of you. Julian pulled out the ring. Simple silver band with a small sapphire. Nothing like the ostentatious diamond he'd given Vanessa. This ring came from a local jeweler on Morrison Street, designed by Sarah's favorite metalwork artist. Will you marry me? Not Julian Bourne the heir, not Julian the reformed rich kid, just me. The guy who still occasionally burns tortillas and definitely doesn't have all his shit figured out. Sarah laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, obviously yes, you ridiculous man. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed as Morrison Street woke up around them. Construction workers heading to job sites, nurses finishing night shifts, the bodega owner rolling up his gate. Their community, their home. Your father's going to have opinions about the wedding, Sarah said, admiring her ring. Let him have opinions. It's our wedding. Julian grinned. Though I'm thinking Morrison Street. Taco cart catering. Kids from the center painting a mural as the backdrop. Perfect. Sarah kissed him again. Absolutely perfect. The community center's grand opening was everything they'd hoped for. 300 people packed the space. Kids from the neighborhood, vendors from Morrison Street, social workers and teachers and artists. Richard Bourne stood in the corner, talking quietly with Rosa, and Julian caught his father smiling. Actually smiling. Maya stood in front of her self-portrait, explaining her artistic choices to a captivated audience. Diego led a live sketching demonstration. Elijah's Phoenix sculpture held place of honor at the entrance, a reminder that transformation was possible. Julian found Sarah in the crowd, teaching a small group of kids how to mix colors. She looked up, caught his eye, and mouthed, "I love you." He mouthed it back. His phone buzzed. Thomas, his former assistant, now a friend, saw the news coverage. "You two are changing lives. Proud of you, boss." Julian smiled. He wasn't anyone's boss anymore. Just a guy with a taco cart and a woman he loved and a community he'd learned to serve instead of study. Speech time, Rosa announced, pulling Julian and Sarah to the front. They stood together, Sarah's hand in his, facing the crowd of people who'd taught them what actually mattered. "A year ago," Julian began, "I thought I knew what love looked like, what success meant, what it took to build something worthwhile." He squeezed Sarah's hand. "I was wrong about everything." Sarah picked up the thread. "This center exists because we learned that real strength comes from vulnerability, real wealth comes from community, and real love comes from showing up, honestly, consistently, imperfectly, for each other and for the people who need us. So thank you," Julian continued, "for teaching us, for forgiving us when we screwed up, for showing us that the best things in life aren't bought, they're built. Together." The crowd erupted in applause, and Julian looked at Sarah, his partner, his teacher, his love, and knew he'd finally found what he'd been searching for. Not someone who loved him despite his flaws, someone who loved him through them. Thank you for going on this journey with Julian and Sarah. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that will make you believe in love again. Drop a comment telling me, what was your favorite moment? Have you ever had to choose between comfort and honesty? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your stories. And hey, where did you watch this from? I want to know how far this story traveled. Until next time, remember, the best version of yourself is the honest one. Stay true, stay kind, and keep showing up. See you in the next story.